Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll give everybody just a second here to get logged in, and we will be in shortly. Again, welcome. We're just giving people a chance to get logged in here, and we will begin shortly. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the pre-proposal conference for RFP number DIR-CPO-TMP-601A for event planning and management, held this Wednesday, August 10th at 2 p.m. If you'll go to the next slide, we just want to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, we want to remind everybody that attendees are muted today, but if you would, please raise your hand and let us know that you can hear us pretty clearly. Just want to make sure we have a good audio connection today. Excellent. See hands going up. Thank you very much for that. So as a reminder, please open your Q&A panel located in your Zoom taskbar and enter your questions in there that you may have as we go along through the webinar today. And we will take some time out to answer those for you as we go today. And a reminder, we will be making the presentation available to you once we finish up the webinar today. So with that, if you'll go to the next slide, I will turn it over to your host and presenter today, Lisa Ramirez.
Thank you, Tom. My name's Lisa Ramirez. I'm the procurement lead for this RFP. Also with us today, we have Colleen, the director of the Chief Procurement Office. Mary's not with us. We missed adding that in there. Brianna is a hub reporting coordinator from the Chief Procurement Office. Marie is with us as well. She is the statewide digital accessibility program administrator from the Chief Technology Office. And also as a presenter, we have Michelle Griffin. She is the Assistant General Counsel from the Office of General Counsel. We do have a few other subject matter experts available today, and they'll be serving as panelists when we go through our question and answer session. Linda Markey is available. Mark Leavenworth and Monica Smoot are also joining us today. So thank you all very much. Next slide. So just to walk through the agenda for our meeting today. First, I'll go over the request for proposal itself, an overview of it, the structure and the contents, the response organization, as well as the evaluation criteria and the schedule. Then Brianna is going to touch base with you all and on the hub subcontracting plan. Marie will then go over the electronic and information resources accessibility. Michelle will then go over the matters of law and exceptions. And then we'll take a quick little break. And when we jump back, we'll answer any questions that you have. And our panelists will be available along with the presenters. Then I'll close the conference out. Next slide. So before we jump into the agenda, there are just a couple of things I want to touch base on. So the DIR is recording this conference and it'll be distributed as an addendum to this solicitation. These slides and the list of attendees will also be included. I also want to remind you all that it's your responsibility to check the ESBD frequently. In this slide, we have the link where this solicitation has been posted. I also want to remind you that webinar participants may submit questions electronically at any time during this webinar using the questions tab. So please feel free to submit your questions as you think of them, and we'll be answering them during the Q&A session. The deadline for submitting questions is August 12th at 5 p.m. and must be emailed to me, lisa.ramirez@dir.texas.gov. Official answers will be distributed as an addendum to the solicitation on the ESBD. Next slide. All right, so we'll jump into the RFP. And if you hit the next slide, I will touch base and give you all an overview. So DIR is issuing this request for proposal to obtain event planning services for DIR events in Austin, Texas. Any of these events could be remote, in person or a hybrid of remote and in-person participants. As a result of this RFP, DIR expects to receive and evaluate responses and select one or more qualified respondents to whom enter into negotiations with. DIR reserves the right to make a single or multiple award as determined by DIR. The successful respondent will plan and manage the details listed in the RFP, from speakers to location, printed materials, audiovisual equipment, sponsorships, site inspections, exhibitors, and attendees. That's just a rough overview. We anticipate that the term of the contract will be an estimated 2 years with 3 one-year renewal options that will be exercised at DIR's sole discretion. Next slide. Now, historically, DIR has hosted 3 to 5 major events, 4 of which we will go over in this presentation. And these events are for the benefits of our customer base and vendor community. DIR hosts a number of smaller events as well with less exhibitor presence. DIR requires event planning and management services for all size of events, so the major and those with less exhibitor presence. Under the scope of the service agreement, DIR may add additional events to serve its constituents. Next slide, please. So we'll go over just a few of the major events. First, our Information Security Forum. So each year, DIR hosts information security forums, and these are educational conferences aimed at information security officers, information resource managers, and IT staff throughout the state of Texas. This has become a premier event focusing on security trends and upcoming technologies. The ISF, Information Security Forum, is a 2-day event that draws about 450 attendees and 90 exhibitors. Next slide, please. DIR Discover is another major event, and the Chief Technology Office, the OCDO and CTO host this 2-day event. And the event provides an excellent opportunity for learning and networking, as well as exploring vendor solutions in the exhibit area. DIR expects similar turnout as previous Data Forum and Tech Forum events that are now combined into this DIR Discover. And those saw an attendance of over 250 public sector employees from over 60 organizations, and exhibitors were at about 30. Next slide, please. E-Records Conference is another major event, and this is co-sponsored between DIR and the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. And this annual conference is for state agency and local government officials involved in the management of electronic records. It's an educational event that seeks to improve electronic records management in Texas government throughout the use of statewide standards and best practices. We have over 120 state agencies, state universities, and local governments, as well as 25 exhibitors that were represented in the 2019 in-person conference. This event was held virtually in 2020 and 2021. For 2022, the event will be in person, and we're exploring the options of a hybrid delivery for future conferences. Next slide, please. DIR Connect is another major event, and a DIR Connect is a conference that's held every other year, and it brings DIR contracted technology vendors together with information technology and purchasing staff from state agencies, local and county government, K through 12, and higher education to raise awareness about all of DIR's key program areas, including cooperative contracts, data center services, communications technology services, information security, and Texas.gov. This particular event includes a wide range of educational breakout sessions, as well as time to network in the exhibit hall. The conference has in the past drawn more than 400 attendees and about 150 exhibitors. Next slide, please. So now we'll go into the RFP structure and content. This RFP solicitation package consists of 11 documents. And so there on the first row, you see the RFP and the RFP's attachments 1 through 7. The purpose of those are to provide instructions and gather information about respondents. Appendix A is the terms and conditions. Appendix B is a service agreement template. And Appendix C is the hub subcontracting plan sample. Next slide, please. The next bit that I'll cover about the RFP is the response organization. And so this first slide, I'll just kind of go over some real important information. And then the next slide is we'll break down what your response should look like. So first, respondents should follow the instructions set forth in the attachments and appendices to the RFP. Each section, attachment, and appendix of the RFP, along with any other associated files, contains individual detailed instructions regarding the required format of the respondent's response. The respondent is required to respond according to the instructions contained in each section of the RFP. Respondent's response must be consistent with the structure, sequencing, and terminology used in the RFP. Where provided, the respondent must use files enclosed with the RFP and in the prescribed format to submit its response. Electronic responses are required only for this solicitation. And now this is an outline of how you should organize your response. So this is what you will actually submit back to us. Attachment 1 is the respondent information form. Attachment 2 is a compensation. Attachment 3 is a non-disclosure agreement. Attachment 4 is a respondent release of liability. Attachment 5 is the voluntary product accessibility template. Attachment 6 is the vendor accessibility development services information request. Attachment 7 is the policy-driven adoption for accessibility. Then you will also include your hub subcontracting plan, and you can see the example that's provided as Appendix C, the hub subcontracting plan sample, to complete yours. The respondent is also responsible for submitting a narrative of experience, and you can refer to section 3.6.2 of the RFP for the response requirements in that narrative of experience. Lastly, the sample planning approach is also required, and you can see again section 3.6.2 of the RFP response requirements for what is included in that sample planning approach. Now, it's very important to note that each of these must be filled out in their entirety and signed by an officer or agent empowered to contractually bind the successful respondent. Next slide, please. All right, I'm now going to go over the evaluation criteria. And first, I will touch base on pass-fail criteria and then the weighted criteria. So first, the pass-fail criteria, DIR will review them as follows. So first, financial information is a pass-fail review of a Dun and Bradstreet report conducted by our finance group. We also do a review of your submitted hub subcontracting plan. So that must be completed and signed. If it's not signed, that's not completed, and that will be an automatic fail. Next, compliance with applicable provisions of those government codes. And respondents may also fail this selection for any of the following conditions. A score of less than a C in the vendor performance system. You are currently under a corrective action plan through the CPA, having repeated negative vendor performance review reports. And lastly, if you have had purchase orders that have been canceled in the previous 12 months for non-performance, including but not limited to late delivery. Next slide, please. Lastly, with the pass-fail criteria, is compliance with Texas Government Code 2054, subchapter MTAC 206, and as follows. Those technical standards are as applicable. So respondents may fail this section criteria for any of the following reasons. If you're missing a product ACR for products listed on the itemized price sheet, if you're missing a VADSER for proposed development services on the itemized price sheet, and if you're missing a PDAA self-assessment. If those sounded foreign to you, don't worry. Marie is going to be going over this when she speaks about the accessibility criteria in an upcoming section. Next slide, please. Lastly, with regards to evaluation criteria, I'll touch base on the weighted evaluation criteria. So DIR uses the following criteria listed in order of priority to determine the best value for the state. So first, experience, including but not limited to business relationship experience, and that's at 30%. The planning approach is at 20%. Quality of service per the references provided are at 30%, and pricing at 20%. Next slide, please. This is the schedule of events for this request for proposal. And as you can see, this was published on August the 3rd. And today at 2 o'clock, we kicked off our pre-proposal meeting. We the deadline for submitting questions to me via my email address that is published in the RFP is August 12th at 5 p.m. I am the sole contact for that, as mentioned in the RFP. So if you have any questions, I'm the point of contact for any questions. The answers will be posted to the ESBD on August 15th. The deadline for submitting responses is August 19th at 2 p.m. And beginning on August 22nd, we'll kick off our evaluation, clarification, and potentially amended responses. On August 29th, we aim to conduct negotiations. August 31st is when we aim to make our award decisions. And then by September 5th, we are scheduled to have our agreements signed and POs issued. Next slide, please. So really important things to remember. Sign the required forms. So respondents must provide a signed page 1 of each addendum with their response. So right now, as I've already gone through, we will publish an addendum with this meeting. So we are going to publish this. I got confused. I was like, did I say this or not? We are going to publish this, this presentation and the slides to the ESBD, and it will be an addendum. And so you will need to, as part of your response, submit a signed page of that addendum. You'll also need to submit, of course, as we mentioned earlier, the signed SHP and your signed response. Submitting your response 1 minute late makes a difference when it comes to procurement. And so make sure that you remember, or that you submit that before 2 p.m. on August 19th. And that wraps it up for the RFP section. I will hand it over to Brianna for the Hub subcontracting plan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Ballinger. I am a Hub coordinator with DIR. Next slide, please. First, we're going to start out with the HSPs. A sample HSP form has been included in the RFP package as RFP attachment appendix C. Respondents must complete this form, print, sign, and submit their signed HSP with their response. If you are unable to use the sample form, we have included the comptroller link for the HSP. Please remember, these documents are owned and controlled by the comptroller's office. We are required to utilize these forms, and we cannot change, manage, or update these forms. Next slide. All respondents, hub or non-hub, are required to submit an HSP. Failure to submit a completed HSP will cause your response to be rejected. This is a pass or fail item. DIR encourages all respondents to seek historically underutilized businesses or hubs, subcontractors, and maximize their hub participation in their bids. There are 3 ways to complete the HSP. You will either self-perform, you will meet or exceed your hub goal and complete method A, or you will not meet the hub goal and complete method B. Next slide, please. If your proposed subcontracting includes only active hubs, or you meet or exceed the 26 hub goal percentage, you will complete method A. Be sure to identify all hubs and non-hub vendors you will be subcontracting with. Include the anticipated dollar amounts and expected percentages. So for this method, you will complete section 1, 2, 4 in method A. Please don't forget to sign and date your HSP in section 4. Next slide. If you are going to subcontract below the hub goal, you will need to complete method B. Be sure to solicitate a minimum of 3 hub certified companies and 2 minority trade organizations. You must allow them 7 working days to respond to your prior, you must allow them 7 working days to respond prior to your due date before the RFP closes, prior to the due date. Sorry about that. Include your outreach to these entities, either email, faxes, any correspondence. You will need, for this method, you will need to complete section 1, 2, 4 in method B. Please don't forget to include the approximate dollar amounts and percentages. It must be signed and dated. Next slide, please. If you will be self-performing, you will need to complete section 1, 2, 3, and 4. In your self-performing justification, you will need to identify how your company will fulfill this contract with its own staff, equipment, and resources. Please remember you cannot say that you will be subcontracting in the future or if you will need subcontracting. Please tell us how you will be self-performing. Next slide. You will also, so we're going to move to the PARs, the Progress Assessment Report. PARs must be submitted to DIR on a monthly basis. This language is identified in your service agreement. If you don't know what a PAR is, or if you don't know what the form looks like, we have included the comptroller link here for your use. And if you need help completing this form, we can help you walk through that. These documents, please remember, these documents are owned and controlled by the comptroller's office. We are required to utilize these forms, but we cannot change, manage, or update these forms. We also ask that you copy the DIR Hub office when submitting these forms to your contract managers. Do we have any questions on the HSP or PARs?
Brianna, we do have a question in the chat, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A function. It says, if a company has contract labor, but they are fully supervised by the respondent, is that considered a hub subcontract? These are hourly or daily labor to assist with events hired on this basis to work events.
I believe if they're 1099, it depends if they're how they're being paid.
That's correct. This is Laura. And if they are 1099s, they are considered subcontractors and they're not part of your company. If they're part of your company, they are W-2 employees.
No vendor paid under their social security number will be listed on the HSP, if that helps. Okay, and I will turn it over to the next presenter. Oh, I'm sorry. This last slide. Our team will provide a precursory review for your HSP prior to the due date. You must contact us no later than 10 days prior to the due date of this RFP. I have included our hub manager, Teresa Williamson's email address, and you can also contact us through the DIR Hub office email address. I believe that was my last slide. I'm turning it over to Mary now.
Thank you. Hi, this is Marie Cohan. I'm the Statewide Digital Accessibility Program Administrator in our Chief Technology Office. Next slide. So a little bit about our EIR accessibility background. There is a Texas government code allowing basically stipulating that DIR state agencies and institutions of higher education must procure electronic and information resources that comply with accessibility standards as defined in Texas Administrative Code, and also using standard guidelines and technical standards set by the World Wide Web Consortium and WCAG 2.0 AA. Also, vendors must provide accessibility documentation with their solicitation responses, and this documentation can be requested by DIR at the time of the original solicitation, and it can be requested again by any of our customers who are procuring off of that existing contract. Next slide, please. So the documentation that is required with your solicitation that with regard to EIR accessibility, the first one is the voluntary product accessibility template. This is a template that is completed by a product manufacturer. This is strictly for products, which also includes SaaS or PaaS applications, anything in the cloud. These are required for each individual product. And once the VPAT is completed, it is called an accessibility conformance report, and that is what will be submitted with your solicitation response. Next slide, please. The next document is a vendor accessibility development services information request. This is a document specific to development services. So any type of web application development or customization of a product, anything that involves changing code or developing any impact to a user interface would fall in this category. And this document does need to be submitted with your solicitation for these types of services. Next slide, please. The following piece of documentation, or the last piece of documentation, is the policy-driven adoption for accessibility. This is a document that is not attached to a product or a service. This is a vendor self-assessment that helps DIR and our customers understand where your organization is at on your accessibility journey. It helps us determine the maturity level of your accessibility program. And this is very useful in making a good procurement decision around accessibility for compliance. Next slide, please. These are resources that are available for all of you. These can be found on our DIR website, with the exception of the VPAT template that is on the itic.org website. And are there any questions? Next slide, please.
Marie, I do not see any questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect. If there's any follow-up questions, Lisa will be able to pass those along to me. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Griffin. I'm Assistant General Counsel for DIR. Next slide, please. So I just want to give a short disclaimer that this is an overview of only a few of the legal considerations. It's certainly not comprehensive. So as always, consult with your legal counsel if you do have questions. The first thing I want to highlight is the restriction on contacting only our designated contacts. So in this case, please do not communicate about this procurement with anyone other than Lisa. The sole exception, as we noted previously, is communicating with our hub office. But other than that, please do not reach out to any other contacts at DIR about this procurement. We take this very seriously, and we hope you do too. We don't want to disqualify any vendors, but we won't hesitate to do so if this is violated. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to just touch briefly on the Public Information Act. This is going to be an important consideration as you prepare your submission documents and as you communicate with the designated contact. So DIR is a state agency, and so we're required to comply with the Public Information Act, and all the information in our possession is subject to the Public Information Act. So that means that every physical electronic document, every email and attachment, everything that you submit is going to be subject to this law. The starting point is that all information is considered to be public. There's a few protections for your proprietary information. So we are required to notify you if someone requests release of your proprietary information and give you a chance to protect that information. But of course, we don't necessarily know what information you've submitted is going to be considered proprietary. So in this case, it's your job to let us know. So in everything that you submit, please clearly mark the information that you consider proprietary, confidential, or copyrighted. If it's not marked and we get a request from the public, we will release that information. If it is marked as confidential, proprietary, or copyrighted, we'll then submit that to the Attorney General if we get a public information request, and then you will have the right to object to the release of that information, and ultimately the Attorney General makes that determination. A little bit of guidance on marking your documents. If you do have something you consider confidential, please don't just mark a cover page, mark every item that you consider confidential. But please don't also just mark everything confidential, because if there's a request, the Attorney General is going to be asking you to justify why you've marked something as confidential, and you don't want to be in that situation if it's something that's clearly not confidential. Also, just a note: be careful if you use email footers that say just mark everything as confidential, because again, your email asking to set up a meeting at noon, that's not confidential, and you'd have to explain that to the Attorney General if it was requested. And of course, just if you have any questions about this, please coordinate with your legal counsel. Make sure to stay organized and go through this carefully before submitting your documents so that it doesn't cause problems down the road. And with that, I will hand it back over to Lisa to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And so before we jump into questions, we're going to take a 5-minute break just to give you an opportunity to think about anything that you've heard or read that you want to ask a question about. Whether you post a question in the chat or you submit me an email, please make sure that you reference the RFP section number and page number with your submitted questions. That'll help us to get to it faster. And please also remember that questions answered today are unofficial until distributed as an addendum. And my email address, if you want to submit additional questions after today, outside of this, outside of the Q&A chat, at lisa.ramirez@dir.texas.gov. And again, that is by August 12th, 2022 at 5 p.m. So it is 12:34 p.m. We'll take a break until, I'm sorry, 12, it's 2:34 p.m. And we'll take a break until 2:40. And when we return, we'll have questions, or we'll be ready for your questions. Thank you so much. All right, welcome back. It's 2:40 p.m. and we are going to start our question and answer period. I don't see any questions in the Q&A chat. Did I miss anything, Kyle?
No, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A, and it doesn't look like there's anything in the regular chat room either.
Either.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I will just give it another minute and then move forward.
So we do have a question. Do you use Concur for travel and expense reporting submission?
Okay, thank you for your question. Do any of our panelists or subject matter experts have a response for that?
So, I mean, from my understanding, everything we do regarding travel and expenses is processed through the CAPS reporting system, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what's being asked here.
Okay, so Betty, can you clarify? Are you just specifically asking about Concur as a like a software system that is used? Okay, all right. We'll get back to you with an official answer. Right now, I don't see, other than what Kyle mentioned, I don't see that we have anything more specific. Do you have, go ahead. Do you have an existing exhibitor contract or relationship you want to continue for the next year? Colleen, are you available to answer this?
Yes, I am. So we have a current incumbent vendor. That contract is expiring, and this is an open competitive solicitation. So we are open to any and all responses that may come in.
Thank you. And Betty has asked a follow-up question. Are exhibitors and vendors defined the same or differently? If differently, how so?
So I will answer this, but feel free, Tom and others, to jump in. So exhibitors and vendors are relatively the same. They are the vendors who will host booths at the different events that we have. If they get a booth, if they pay the fee and we have space for them, they become an exhibitor, but they start out as vendors that are part of the DIR contracting program, or for some events that are any vendor who's out in the open market who wants to exhibit at our event.
I concur. Some events are specific to current DIR vendors. Other events are open to DIR vendors or the open vendor market.
Thank you, Tom and Colleen. Betty has posted another question. Are vendors defined as companies coming into these meetings / events, providing services with the rewarded company, which the rewarded company is not contracting?
So that I'm not sure I understand the question, but it does seem like we need to address the issue of the definition for vendors. So please look for it in an upcoming addendum where we clearly define who a vendor is and who an exhibitor is.
Thank you, Colleen. All right, Betty has posted another question. Do you have, or what is your current licensing agreement for current virtual platforms that needs to be used.
So anyone can chime in on top of that. And I believe that this is stated clearly in the RFP, is that we're looking for the respondent to provide those platforms that can deliver the services requested.
Yes, and to put it another way, we do not have a current licensing agreement, and we do not have a current virtual platform that the vendor who wins this contract would be required to use. It is something that you will bring in.
All right, and Betty has clarified, correct, but do we need to be aware of any existing relationships or commitments?
We have no existing relationships or commitments.
And Betty has asked, posted another question. Will each event require different platforms /sites, /apps, systems, or can they all be under the same vendor?
So each event can be under the same vendor. There may be slightly different requirements for each event regarding the hosting and the applications, but if you have a vendor who can provide all of the services requested for the event, you may use the same vendor.
I will add that in terms of the way that the respondent is proposing to deliver the services, that be explained in your response, the answer to that question and the methodology behind it that the respondent intends to utilize.
Okay, and Erin Heath has a comment, and it's she's saying ISF for 2023 is contracted for a venue, but that is the only commitment in place for it. DIR is contracted with the Palmer Event Center for March 2023.
And that's correct. I will clarify that commitment was made with the Palmer Event Center as part of survivability. However, any other existing relationships that we have, and that's not actually, I mean, that's a committed reservation. Anything else expires on August 31st with the current contract.
Thank you. And Betty's posted a question regarding the development and implementation for speakers, presenters, as well as organization and selection, plus communication with presenters and speakers. Will you have an SME making the decisions as to which ones are included / excluded?
That's a simple yes.
Thank you. And Betty's next question is, do you have and are you willing to share previous marketing docs and communication types? What worked, did not work, what you did and did not like?
So we do have previous marketing material and communication. We can share a sample. We will post it as part of the addendum. And the contracted vendor, the vendor who wins, we would disclose all of that information to that vendor.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Betty. Thank you all for your questions. I think we have cleared all, here, Betty, all right. Betty has posted a question. How do you prefer attendee expenses are tracked if not through Concur?
I am not hearing an answer. So Betty, do you mind if we get back to you and we can answer that in the formal Q&A?
Thank you so much for your patience, Betty. We will get back to you on that question. So just as a reminder, questions answered today are unofficial until we distribute them as an addendum.
I will just add really quickly, sorry, this is Linda, that in terms of tracking expenses and travel and what platform or what software is used, again, I think we're looking for you to propose what your solution includes and what method you would use to do that. What method would you use to track all of that information and propose your solution to us? We have no preference and no preferred vendor or product.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for your time today. Will you, next slide, please? I'll move into the closing remarks for the conference. And just to remind you that all questions must be directed to myself at lisa.ramirez@dir.texas.gov. Next slide, please. And again, questions answered today are unofficial until we distribute them in the form of an addendum. Any changes or additional information regarding the RFP will be distributed as an addendum to the solicitation number DIR-CPO-TMP-601A. Next slide, please. And just a reminder of the scheduled events. These are the upcoming really important dates to keep in mind. So submitting questions. The deadline to submit is August 12th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. The deadline for submitting your responses is August 19th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Central Time. And we're aiming to have contracts awarded or service agreements awarded at August 31st, 2022. I'm sorry, we're aiming to have our award decision by that date. That is a typo in the slide there. So the awards decision by August 31st, and up above on the slides, then having the agreements signed by September 5th. So let's see, just making sure. All right. Thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it. And with that, I will conclude the meeting.